Hello students, today we will explore some fascinating topic in biology, that is reflex action. Let us break this concept down into simple parts so that you can understand them easily. Accidentally, if we touch a hot object, we jerk our hand away before we get badly burnt. This ability to act quickly and without conscious thought, it is called as reflex. So in simple, reflex actions are quick automatic responses to an external stimulus. They happen without us thinking about them. So this picture shows the sense organs present in our body. So these sense organs, it gives signal to the brain and in back it gets signal or command to respond to the external stimulus. As we already know, what are the functions of these five sense organs? Yes, with the help of our eyes, we can see the object, and with ears, we can hear the sound, and with the tongue, we can have the taste, and with hands we can feel the touch, and with the nose we can smell the things around us. Okay, so these sense organs, they have the receptors to accept the signal, and it transmit the signal to the brain, and from the brain it get back the signal to respond to the stimulus. So in this section we can learn about the responses, how it is sending the signal and how it is getting back the signal from the brain. What is the main process involved in this, we can discuss detail in this session. So before that, we should know some detail about the nervous system. So in a human body, we have two types of nervous system, that is central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So here we are focusing on the central nervous system. So the central nervous system, it consists of brain and the spinal cord. So the brain and the spinal cord, they receive the signals from the sense organs, and it gives back the signal to the sense organs to respond to the external stimuli. So how it is getting the signal? So the brain and the spinal cord, it receives signal through the nerve cells. So this picture shows you the structure of nerve cell. Okay. Now in detail we can learn about the structure of a nerve cell. So neuron, it is the basic structural and functional unit of a nervous system. So the neuron consists of a cell body with a nucleus in it, having dendrite and a long tail-like structure called axon. It is covered with a myelin sheet, and at the end it has an axon terminals. So these axon, it receives the signal from the external stimulus, and it transmits the signal to the other neuron, to the dendrite of the other neuron. Okay. Now, these are the different types of the neurons. So, we have three types of neuron, that is motor neuron, relay neuron and sensory neuron. So, the structure is different between the three neurons because according to their function, the structure of the neuron is seen here. So, in motor neuron, it shows the structure which we learned in the previous slide, and in the relay neuron, you see the position of the cell body, it gets changed. So, the dendrite is at the top, cell body in between the dendrite and the axon. So, the sensory neuron, it is something different from the relay neuron. You can see the cell body in the center, but as an external projection. At the top, dendrite, and in the down, we have the axon terminal. So the structure of the neuron is different. It is based upon their different functions. Now, what's the function of the sensory neuron and motor neuron? So the function of the sensory neuron is to receive the signal from the external stimulus, and it transmit through axon to the central nervous system, that is to the brain or spinal cord. Okay, so in return, it gets the signal from the brain or spinal cord through the nerve cell. See here, they transmit the signal. So here it is called as the motor neuron. Okay, so the transmission of signal from external stimulus to the central nervous system, it is carried by sensory neuron, and from central nervous system to the external stimulus, to respond to the external stimulus, the signal is carried by the motor neuron. Now, how are the signal passed? So, the gap between the two neurons, we call it as a synaptic gap. Okay, so it is the gap where the electrical signal, it's get converted into chemical signal, and it enters into the dendrite or axon of the next neuron to carry forward the signal. Okay. Now see here, as we already learnt about the sensory neuron, what's the function of the sensory neuron? It gets the signal from the external stimulus through dendrites and it passes the signal, see, to the cell body through the axon. It enters into the, it receives the next neuron, that is the interneuron or the relay neuron. It receives the signal from the axon. So the gap between the two neurons only we call it as what? Synaptic gap. Okay. In return from the relay neuron, the signal is passed from axon to the dendrite of the other neuron. See, it carries a signal and from the axon it goes to the effector organ to respond to the external stimuli that we call as the motor neuron. Okay. So this is the flowchart of the reflex action. So the external stimulus may be heat or cold, anything else. And the receptor organ is our skin. Okay, so we have the receptor there. So it receives the signal from the external stimulus and it passes through the sensory nerves to the spinal cord. Okay, and from the spinal cord, see, it receives a signal to the motor nerves and it goes to the effector organ, that is the muscle. So we respond to the external stimulus by withdrawal. We'll take the hand away from the hot object. Okay, so this reflex action, it does not require brain for its signal. Okay, it requires only the spinal cord. So some of the actions are controlled by the spinal cord because reflex actions are the quick automatic responses. No, so the signals are taken from the spinal cord only. See, in this picture you can clearly see that external stimulus here and skin is the receptor organ and it gives a signal to the through the sensory neuron to the relay neuron or the interneuron which is present in the spinal cord and it get back the signal through the motor neuron and it comes to the effector organ and we take back our hand. So this pathway from the sensory neuron to the relay neuron, we call it as an afferent neuron. And from relay neuron through the motor neuron to the effector organ, we call it as an efferent neuron. Okay, so here we get the signal from the spinal cord. So these are the involuntary actions and they are quick responses to the external stimulus. So the whole thing we call it as an reflex action. Hope you all understood this class. Thank you for your listening and happy learning.